Do you remember this part of scripture? John, the Baptist, is sitting in prison, and he sends his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who's to come, or should we expect someone else?" Check out Matthew chapter 11, verse 2. Man, that's tough. This man, John, who spent his life preparing the people, preaching to the people about the coming Messiah, Jesus, and here he is having doubts. Phew, must be tough. Well, was John doubting Jesus? Or was something else going on here? Was there some other form of communication going on during this scene? Well, let's take a closer look. Okay, so let's start with John. First off, his father and mother were elderly in years and unable to have children until one day the angel Gabriel appears to John's father, Zechariah, and tells him that God would provide them with a son who would be filled with God's Spirit before he is even born. And for what purpose? To accomplish this one and only one mission. He was the chosen one that was to prepare the way for the Lord. He was the one who had to usher in the advent of the time of Jesus' ministry. Check out John chapter 1 verse 23. In fact, the Old Testament talks about John's coming. Check out Isaiah chapter 40 and Malachi chapter 3. Now John's dad was a Levitical priest. He was well versed in the scriptures. So John would have had no doubt about who he was and what his mission was. So why question Jesus when in prison? Was he doubting? Well, let's see how Jesus responds to John's question. Jesus replies, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the disabled walk. Those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." Ah, so cool. Thanks, Jesus. But that wasn't his question. His question was, are you the Messiah, or is it someone else yet to come? Well, did Jesus answer his question, or did he beat around the bush? You see, in the first century, rabbis, and Jesus being one of them, used what's called the remez method of teaching, or, if it's easier to understand, the hinting method. But what was he hinting at? Well, oftentimes, rabbis would use the hinting method by quoting a line of the Bible, and the person, especially someone taught in the scriptures as John was, would know right away which passage he was alluding to. So Jesus was actually alluding to John, the passage in Isaiah chapter 35 verses 3 to 6. Here's the passage, and here's what it says the coming Messiah would do. He would strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Then will the eyes of the blind be open, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. Ah, okay, so Jesus was effectively saying, John, you know that passage in Isaiah that speaks about me? Well, I've done all these things. I am the Messiah. Well, there you have it. Jesus answered his question. But that's not the only thing going on. You see, Jesus quotes from Isaiah, but take a closer look. There is a part right in between his response to John that he skips. What does it say? It says, "Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you." What? Why would Jesus skip this passage? Unless he did so purposely. You see, here's what's going on. John was trying to ask Jesus, hey, are you going to rescue me from prison? After all, that is going to be what the Messiah comes to do. But wait, I can't just come out and ask if you're going to break me out of prison. Herod has spies everywhere. So John, knowing how to communicate with Rabbi Jesus, asks the question indirectly. And Jesus basically says, John, you will die in prison. The time for vengeance will come one day, but for now, I'm fulfilling only part of my mission. This is why Jesus skips that verse. Now, I'm sure John was both happy to know Jesus was reassuring him that he was the Messiah, and sad because Jesus was basically telling him he was to die in jail by purposely skipping over the passage about vengeance and saving him. And how can we know for sure this is what Jesus meant? Well, back in the first century, there was a well-known parable in Judaism known as the reed and the oak tree. And what did this parable teach? Well, it taught that storm winds would gust and the reeds would bend in the wind, sometimes violently, but they would never break. The oak tree, on the other hand, was firmly rooted and wouldn't bend. In fact, the oak tree was so stubborn, even in the harshest winds, that sometimes instead of bending, it would simply break in half. Well, what does this have to do with John the Baptist? Take a look at what Jesus says in the next passage. He says, "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind?" Jesus is telling the crowd, what did you expect? That John would bend to Herod and compromise the truth to save his life? Like a reed? Were you expecting this? No, I tell you, he will not compromise. He will remain steadfast like that oak tree. And in this storm, he will be broken in half. His life will be shaken violently because he won't compromise the truth that I am the Messiah. Amazing. One simple question reveals so much. That John is the prophesied prophet that paved the way for Jesus, that Jesus was indeed the Messiah, that he came first to fulfill only part of his mission, and that Jesus tells John that he would die in prison, without even saying it directly. So was John doubting Jesus? Sure, maybe a little. He's human after all, and dedicated his whole life to this cause. But more than that, John was asking if he would ever leave his prison cell, and if Jesus would save him and avenge him. But it wasn't to be, not yet at least. If you like this video, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and please share it with anyone you think might like it.